Tonight on Broadcasting Buffalo, good storytelling. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. Today we're going to talk about ways to improve your storytelling. You know, over the years, as a professional journalist as well as a college professor, I've seen a lot of stories that just didn't come out as good as they should have. And the reason for that is they weren't put together well. The main thing you need to realize is that you are a storyteller. Sure, you're a reporter who gathers the materials and presents them, and obviously you want to be fair and accurate, but you have to tell a story that people understand as well as they relate to. That gives them some sense of feeling or some sense of ownership. So we're going to look at the mistakes you should avoid when you're out in the field and also some things you should be doing when you get back to the edit booth. Let's get started. The first rule of good storytelling is you make it interesting. And the best way to do that is by starting with an interesting opening shot. In many ways, it's kind of like fishing. You know, if you have the right bait on the hook, you'll attract the fish. And that's what you want to do with your opening shot. You want to hook your viewers and keep them there. Nowadays, in the era of the remote control, it's easy to lose their interest and bang, they're out of here. So when you shoot, think about a good opening shot. And when you bring your material back, select a good opening shot. And now, let's see a few good examples of those opening shots. Now you'll notice many of these shots were framed relatively tight, and that's always a good eye catcher. But one thing you really want to think about is choose action over locators. Don't just show us a boring statue or a building. Get some kind of action in your opening video, whatever it may be.
Guantang is a quiet village.
In 1986.
Golden Beach. Another thing every one of those shots has in common is they all have natural sound. So as you edit, make sure you can hear that natural sound, especially if your subject matter is relatively quiet. And here's a must when you're shooting and editing. You should always be using headphones. With them, you'll be able to hear more clearly problems that your ear may not pick up in open air or in an everyday setting, but your trustworthy headphones will. Now, as you get into your package and you start to edit, there's another mistake you want to avoid that can also have your viewers reaching for the remote. And that's what's called wallpapering.
According to advisors on campus, one of the most important parts of a college student's education is obtaining an internship, giving you hands-on experience for when you apply for jobs. We talked with Pam Lent, the Director of Communications for Empire State Development, on her personal experience with what she looks for in an intern.
I look for somebody who's excited about doing television news.
So what is wallpapering? Well, the video version of it at least means you're just covering your story with a lot of random shots. You shouldn't work that way. You need to give some thought to how the words and pictures relate. Words and pictures should go together. And here's an example of a student who did some serious wallpapering.
If you want to embrace the sky, do not miss the chance. On November 1st, Southern China Airlines were holding a recruitment fair in Beijing Normal University.
Now in this case, the words did not connect clearly to the video. We're seeing shots of feet, but my student says, if you want to embrace the sky, don't miss the chance. And if viewer goes, say what? It makes no sense because the words and pictures don't have a connection. So I suggested this rewrite and listen to the difference.
The applicants were walking into the interview room. It was a chance for Len to become air hostess. On November 1st, Southern China Airlines were holding a recruitment.
So at the rewrite, now my student says the applicants were walking into an interview. It was a chance for them to become air hostesses. Now the words and pictures do have a connection. They make sense. And that's what you always have to remember. It's your job as a reporter to guide the viewer. If they get lost or confused, they're going to be at home scratching their head and wondering what your story is all about. And you haven't done your job as a reporter. So make sure always words and pictures match. Now, here are a few more examples where students got it right when words and pictures do match.
A mechanism that used to open the Fredonia Opera House curtain over a century ago is just one hidden piece of history lying within downtown Fredonia.
They like to laugh, they like to draw pictures on the ground, and they like to talk to people. These children deserve.
Now, we mentioned using natural sound at the beginning of your story, but don't forget about it in other spots in your story. It's great to stop the action and have a natural sound pause. Natural sound can set a mood, convey a feeling, give the viewer a feeling like they are there. And here's a few examples of students who use natural sound pauses very effectively.
Put the mooncake into a shaper and press. The intake mooncake is done.
You know, you hear the term spring chick. It is a time for hatching.
So if you're interested in starting your own flock of backyard chickens, contact the City Clerk's office at City Hall.
We take so many things for granted. They had to really make their living with their hands.
Anyone who has a joy for history or who wants to get one.
Natural sound also does a few other things. It can provide a transition for your story, or it can break up a long interview or maybe even your voice track, but it balances all the different sound elements. Remember, everything has natural sound on it. Even a quiet library has sound of some kind. So look for the natural sound and use it. When we come back, using your camera effectively.
This is a college that inspires. Here you'll be engaged, strive for excellence, and prepare for a career. Visit our amazing Elmwood Village campus and apply today. You'll achieve your edge here. This place is Buffalo State College.
Hello, Buffalo. I'm Ed Asner. You may remember me as television's no-nonsense news director Lou Grant. And if you think about it, journalists provide us with our first draft of history. Right here in Buffalo, more than 50 years of TV news coverage is being brought back to life. Local stations are working with the Buffalo Broadcasters Association to bring back the stories that helped define the Niagara frontier.
The Pheasant Lane neighborhood, where drifts reach to the rooftops.
It's called the Archive Project, and I support it with all my heart. So should you.
Another mistake I've noticed over the years, students tend to go crazy with pans and zooms. Pans and zooms do have a place in a story, but over the years I've noticed students tend to overuse them or don't do them very well. They should be purposeful and steady. Now, if you do use a pan, there should be a reason for it. You know, a beautiful scenery or a sports event or whatever. But make sure you do it in normal time. It should not be painfully slow like this one. This particular pan lasts for about 30 seconds, and it's very long, much too long. The average news story is only about 1 minute and 30 seconds. So if you wasted 30 seconds on this one shot, you haven't done a very good job of storytelling. Watch what happens when pans and zooms go bad.
After a disappointing last season, the Fredonia men's basketball team is ready for a comeback, and with new coach Philip Seymour on the lead, the Blue Devils seem to be heading.
Which died in the hotel after Jack killed his wife, then later committed suicide. We got a chance to speak.
Pans and zooms should also not make your viewers feel like they're getting seasick. You should also be using a tripod. Take a look why. Of course, sometimes there are situations when you cannot use a tripod. Some of my students, for example, were in a museum one time, and because of all the fragile objects, they wouldn't let them use the tripod. And here's what happened to their video.
Clothes, photos, piano, hassock, and furniture are displayed in the houses.
So the solution's simple. I told them to freeze their shots, and now look at the difference.
Clothes, photos, piano, hassock, and furniture are displayed in the houses.
And obviously you can only freeze static shots, objects, statues, buildings, whatever. You can't do it with action video. But suppose you don't have a tripod, or for some reason your tripod's broken. Well, now it's time to find a substitute tripod. Put your camera on the ground, a table, a wall, or whatever. Anything that will make your shot steady. Now as you shoot your video, try to find some of those different moments that are either cute or humorous. For example, this little boy buried in the sand is one such moment, or a child doing the same thing to their parent, or even this shot of a cat playing with the string. There's lots of cute everyday moments that can add that little something different to your package. And here's a humorous moment, someone losing their balance on a couch. My student didn't use it in their package, but I told them to do it because it's different and it's funny. The same is true of your stand-up. If you make a mistake, it might even be more interesting or make the point better. Here's the edited version of what my student did.
I'm shaping the moon cake. So cute, isn't it?
Now here's the version the student didn't use. As you can see, she screwed it up several times, and that might have been an interesting stand-up because she could have shown that it's actually very hard to do some baking, and it's probably a job best left for a professional baker. Now it's time to talk about composition. Pay close attention to where you put your interview subject as well as what's going on in the background. Now look at this video. In this setting, the boy is placed in the class and it's very interesting. Of course, in the real world, sometimes things will not be that orderly and might be a little chaotic as kids making faces and God knows what else. But it's okay as a reporter to tell them to behave. And here, looking through a stained glass window is a nice touch for framing. And in this case, framing an interview a little wider and making the Chinese pagoda a key element of the composition really works. And then there are sound bites. Unfortunately, not everyone you interview will be interesting, but that doesn't mean they have to be boring. There are definitely some things you can do to jazz it up. First of all, use short sound bites. Generally, your interview should not go for more than 12 seconds. If you want to have that subject speak more than once, break it up into 2 parts. Put your voice track in between the interview parts, or use a piece of natural sound.
And
Another thing you can do to jazz up an interview is cover the sound bites. That means show some pictures of what they're talking about. Of course, to do that, you have to listen carefully during the interview and make sure you get pictures of those points they're talking about.
Moon Over Buffalo is about a touring theater company who happens to be in Buffalo, New York. It's really about a family who is trying to stay together and a company who's trying to put up a play against a lot of difficult situations.
Still another idea, have your interviewee do something, show and tell, so to speak. Don't be content to just have them behind a desk when they could be doing something interesting. In fact, they might feel more comfortable actually doing something and give you a better interview. Still on sound bites, another thing you can do is avoid backing into sound bites. That's when you're showing the person in the interview framing flapping their lips when you're talking to them. It's what you don't want to do, so shoot video of them doing something.
is one of them.
We are opening more Wing Chun schools abroad, aiming at enlarging the impact of Chinese Kung Fu.
Even if you think you're just doing an interview, always shoot video of your subject doing something. Remember, you can discard what you don't need, but you can't use what you don't have. For both your sound bites and your stand-ups, a good technique is what's called a match cut. That's when you show action that matches what you have, but the framing is different. And here's a few more good examples. Now, when you're done editing, it's always a good idea to take a break. Walk away from the project for a while, because sometimes when you're staring at video for long periods of time, you may miss out on the mistakes or other things you may want to change. So take a break and go back to it. In fact, if you got a friend handy, ask them to look it over and make sure it makes sense and also that it's clear. When you're doing a news story, you not only have to think like a reporter, you have to think like your audience. So here's a checklist for you as you look at your final project. Is everything clear? Will your audience understand the points? Are you focusing on the parts of the story they care about? What affects them? Remember, it has to be understandable the first time, since they can't go back and rewatch it like they can with reading a newspaper. You can't pick it up again and read it again. So clarity on TV is the key.
Up next, interviewing tips.
Experience Buffalo and Erie County's unique stories with the new Buffalo History Museum podcast. Connect with Western New York's history as you listen to detailed narratives about heritage, architecture, business, innovation, and significant events and people throughout time. The podcast takes inspiration from the museum's collection and beyond, from experts on staff and featured guests. From the 1918 influenza to F. Scott Fitzgerald, experience the stories that make up our region. The Buffalo History Museum podcast. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
No matter the occasion, the Premier Group is here for you. Take advantage of our easy online ordering and curbside pickup, or shop the finest selection of unique wines, spirits, and gifts at any of our 3 independently owned Western New York locations.
Your life has taught you a lot. Now your experience can help change a child's life. Read to Succeed and AARP Experience Corps are looking for local volunteers, 50 and older, to help children in Buffalo City schools learn to read. You'll receive training to help you be a great tutor. You have what it takes to change a young person's life. The experience may even change your own. Volunteer by going to readtosucceedbuffalo.org.
Today we're going to talk about interviewing people for all your video projects and how to get the very most out of those interview subjects. You know, just as everything in life needs a little polishing from time to time, so do your interviewing skills. Even though every interview offers something different, they do have some things in common. I'm struck by how underappreciated the art of interviewing is. Here's one thing you should never forget. Interviewing has a lot more value than just getting a soundbite out of somebody. A good interview basically serves up your story on a platter. That means not only do you get a soundbite, but you'll also receive information that will help you write the rest of your story. It can identify elements you may have overlooked or reinforce what you already know. Plus, it might give you ideas for how to visualize things. If the interviewee feels really comfortable with you, they might suggest other sources of information or even people you should be interviewing. Those are some of the reasons why it's important to do an effective interview. Basically, it does a lot of the work for your script. But for that to happen, here's probably the biggest challenge of good interviewing. Most people get very nervous about appearing on camera. They're generally used to being on the other side of the camera for things like birthday parties, weddings, and holidays, among other things. Unless your interview subject is used to the limelight, they're probably going to be very nervous on camera. So here's what to do before you roll any video. The main goal is to get them to relax. So how do you accomplish that? The first thing you have to do is park your ego. Remember, usually you're a stranger to the people you interview. Your project may be very important to you, but not necessarily to them. That's why it's important to make a connection with your interviewee before the interview actually starts. That way, once it gets going, it should be more effective. You can start the conversation by looking for clues in their home or office, wherever the interview will take place. For example, if you see lots of family pictures, that's something you can chat about. Or if you notice many religious pictures, their faith is probably important, or it might even be a pet house. Begin by talking about something that seems important to them. That can be the icebreaker to get them talking. It's okay to start an interview off track, chatting about things which have nothing to do with the subject at hand. It's a way of getting them comfortable with the conversation, just like in everyday life. Eventually, you can steer your conversation towards the topics that you want to cover. If they chit-chat too much, you can politely tell them you don't want to take any more of their time than is necessary. So let's start the interview. When you're dealing with people who have not been on camera previously, the interview is probably the last thing you want to do. If you can, shoot your other footage first with them. That will give them a chance to get comfortable with the video camera while you take the footage. It will show them that TV is their friend. But it is a good idea still to put the mic on them while you're videotaping. They might make some good comments that turned out just as good as the formal interview. Your informal chat ahead of time is a good opportunity to organize the interview questions. They may offer something you didn't know about, which should be one of your questions. Before you roll any video, you should always pre-interview. It gives them and you the opportunity to get organized mentally. Also, people are afraid of the sucker punch. They worry about looking bad on TV. People are always leery about coming across as stupid. A pre-interview will put them at ease, and that should produce a better interview. At this time, you may also want to consider some big picture questions. Things like how this situation affects others. Who's supposed to be taking action? What needs to be done? Stress how important their perspectives are to the success of your story. That can have a positive impact on their performance. Where you do the interview can be just as important as the interview itself, especially if it's in a location that they are especially comfortable with. When they're comfortable and relaxed, good material flows out naturally as they open up. There's nothing wrong with letting them do something while you chat, as long as what they do is not noisy. If you have time, you can even try interviewing them in a couple of different settings. Not only improve their comfort level, it may also make your story more interesting. When you screen the interviews to extract the sound, it's kind of like a surgical process. But at the same time, the leftover sound can help you in a number of different ways. It provides information to help with writing your script. It can give you information for your stand-up. Information that's not used as a soundbite can be used by you. Since you now have information from them, you can use it to think of video to shoot or special effects to create. We've talked about preparing the interview subject. Now let's talk about guiding the interview once it actually gets underway. Just like a body of water, it needs to flow. Another way of putting it, you need to let it breathe. There's nothing wrong with preparing a list of questions ahead of time. In fact, as an inexperienced interviewer, you should. Still, if you're too locked into your list of questions, you might miss out on some magic moments. So don't be afraid to depart from the question list or your script. Whether you're chatting informally or in the actual interview situation, the best thing you can do is, that's right, listen. Let the people tell their stories. Listening carefully also improves the chances of them opening up. Just as important as listening, make eye contact. Don't be buried in your sheet of questions. That might send out a signal to them that you're disinterested. Another issue that often comes up is, do you give interviewees the questions ahead of time? And generally my answer is, if you give people the questions ahead of time, I think you run the risk of it sounding too rehearsed or even too phony. So better off just give them the parameters of what you want to talk about. Of course, if it's a tough interview situation with persons of questionable character, you would never give them the questions anyway. Let's talk more about the flow of the interview. You should definitely ease into the conversation. Don't feel like you got to ask your best question first. In fact, you probably shouldn't. It gives your interview subject a chance to get more comfortable, and ultimately, they'll probably give you a better answer. But when it comes to an unfriendly or a confrontational interview, you should never ask your toughest question first. Wait a bit into the interview. They might volunteer info they had not planned on sharing just because they've become more comfortable. At the end of the interview, be sure to ask them if there's anything else that they would like to share. They may think of some things that you had not discussed earlier. Do try to keep your interview focused. Remember, the more video you shoot, the more you have to screen later on. That's why pre-interviewing is so important. It helps cut down on wasted footage. Even if your news video is just for a class, you should always try to dress professionally. Remember, it might wind up being resume material. Many times I've had students say to me, I wish I had dressed a little nicer in a particular story. So get in the habit of doing it all the time. Don't be too flashy. Look for colors that look good on you on camera. You can audition your clothes with a video camera. Certain colors look better on camera or not as good as in real life, so you'll have to experiment. Generally, women should avoid excessive jewelry, especially accessories which give an overwhelming appearance. Watch your grooming. Too much hair for either men or women will create the wrong mood. Remember, to be treated like a professional, you have to look like a professional. You should be preparing questions that you as an expert want answered, but you should also give some thought to what most people would probably want to know. During the interview, you have to manage it and deal with whomever you're speaking to. You have to guide them towards what's important, at least what you think is important. Afterwards, you have to take all the material you've gathered and decide how to tell a good story. An effective interview can provide a lot of guidance for your news package, especially if you chatted with somebody who has a lot of expertise in a certain area. Your goal should be a lot more than just getting a good soundbite or two. You want to conduct an effective interview which gathers lots of information for eventually putting your story together. Try to keep in mind all the tips we've shared today, and eventually they'll become second nature, just like a seasoned professional. I'm Professor Mike Igoe, wishing you well in all your interviews, as well as in your future career.